This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Karina Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different cues.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Karina Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 with Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate Bobby Charles.
So speaking of keeping the money, what do you think of the millionaire tax?
I think it is an abomination. And let me explain as quick as I can why. The millionaire tax is a 2% surcharge that the Democrat legislature just put on people who make over $1 million, so-called. Now, this is, by the way, the latest income tax. They did another one last year. They did another one the last cycle. They keep raising the income tax, okay, which is why I want to get rid of the income tax, because it's a dinosaur that is about to sink the ship. I don't know if dinosaurs are ever on ships, but anyway, if there were, it's going to sink the ship. What does it mean? The millionaire tax, this 2% surcharge, in a state where a large number of our small businesses are pass-throughs, which are LLCs, you can appear to make a lot of money. It gets taxed to you on your income tax. You might have a number of employees that you're keeping going. I am. I've run a company for 25 years. I have employees. I've never missed a paycheck. Sometimes I've had to take out a HELOC loan to keep going after '08 because it was a mess. But you just keep going. I don't let any of the employees know. We work hard. We keep moving forward. So what that tax does is it's causing people who are small businesses, never mind individuals, who are actually making jobs. It's making them pay more money. And let's just use an example. A company that has 20 employees, if you have to pay a significant amount of taxes beyond where you are today, every businessman listening to this knows the biggest cost for a business is labor. It's typically not capital, it's the labor. For the capital, you're going to get depreciation. It'll go over time. It'll last for an extended period. But people are ebb and flow. That's your labor force. And we already have problems with labor force here. But one of the things that basically they're going to do is they're going to say, how do I pay that tax? I'm either going to leave the state, and there's an estimate that 7% of our top earners will now leave the state as a result of that. And the other income bill was 3% would leave the state. But imagine if they stay in the state, because the transactions costs of leaving the state are higher than it would be to stay here. How are they going to make up that money? They just don't get to pick it off apple trees, okay? There are no such things as money trees. They're going to lay off people. And if you look at the economic analysis of what that 2% charge millionaires tax did, it has already, upon becoming effective, it will cost the state between 8,000 and 16,000 jobs. What we do not need is more Democrat mandates and more Democrat taxes that kill small business, ruin our business climate, disincentivize people to stay here. We lose between 300 and 400 businesses a year. We need to reverse that. We need to bring into this state between 300 or 400 businesses a year. We need to encourage entrepreneurship. We need to encourage young people to get out there. And by the way, cutting the income tax to the bone over 4 years will encourage young people to stay here. And when you cut the property taxes down, that lowers the rent that the young people have to pay, and you put the trades back in the junior high schools and the high schools, all of a sudden you've got a virtuous circle. You've got an economy that's working and growing, and then you incentivize the legacy industries, the heritage industries, and you bring new industries in. We could talk all about that, but the real thought here is we have concrete, well-proven mechanisms for growth in the state. And we have proven that if you allow a one-party state that's Democrat-controlled to keep raising taxes, raising regulations, and making life more expensive, it will run people out of the state and it will make people poorer. So I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to make this a pro-business state.
Well, you brought it up, and we hear it day to day, and actually our property taxes are going up again. What is your plan for reducing or getting rid of our property tax?
Well, of course, in the best of all worlds, I'd love to be Ron DeSantis and get rid of property taxes. I want to take people back in time, and I have a plan. They can go up to my website and look at the whole plan. I've got a detailed plan on energy cost reduction, a detailed plan on property tax and others. But, you know, in the old days, people had predictability in their life. We had relatively good health care. We had a school system that produced kids that you could comfortably say weren't going to go to school a boy and come home a girl. We weren't going to have craziness. They would have a prosperous life after they got a good education. And I'm an indication of that. And we had a state government that we trusted. And we had property taxes that were at a level where people could reasonably expect. Maybe they would increase if you were going to put a new addition on a school, or you had an RSU that was going to build out a new high school, or you might hire a teacher, but they were predictable. The school system's costs were predictable. The sheriff's costs were predictable. The prison system costs were predictable. And the fundamentals that a town and a county, which depend on property taxes, they were all predictable. What we have now is a radical distortion of the tax environment. We are the number one property taxed state in the United States. That by itself is a disgrace, particularly in a state where the per capita income is $42,000. And I think the median worker's income is $72,000 or $73,000. We are not a wealthy state. So I get calls, as you just mentioned a minute ago, I got a call from a couple, an older couple. I say an older couple. I'm an older couple. I'm older, but in any event, this older couple says to me, we were paying $2,700 a year at the beginning of the mill's time. And now, even though it's not a state tax, it's a local tax, we're paying $8,900 a year now. And they said, we did everything right. We raised our kids, we put money away, we paid off our mortgage, and we're not sure we're going to be able to make it. They asked me, what can we do? And I said, well, you can appeal. Right now, all I can do, I'm not a governor yet, but I told them there's a process, but it's very frustrating. What we need to do is really very fundamental. We need at the state level to roll back the hundreds and hundreds. Somebody recently said, you realize it tops 1,000, but the hundreds of regulations, and I've read them and seen them. They're in every possible area. They're in education, everything that affects a township, from the environment to the school system. You need to roll back all these unfunded mandates, because what the state is doing is they're putting an ideology forward and they're pushing it down onto you as a town citizen or a town selectman or a mayor or a city council. And they're saying, we want you to be virtuous in the following ways. This solar, this drug addiction, this with your schools. This is how you're going to take care of all your second language kids. We have more than 7,000 kids in this state who can't speak English. This is what you're going to do for all these people. And they push it down onto the town. The town doesn't have a lot of ways to raise money. There's no income tax at the town level. All you can do essentially is raise property taxes. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to roll back hundreds and hundreds of regulations. And then the second thing we're going to do is use the power of the governor to leverage a compliance in each of these townships, which is to say some have decided, well, we like spending a lot of money. Even though we got a lot of townspeople that can't make it, we have a bunch of other people that have decided that this is all the ideologically right thing to do. Well, the way you do this is you do exactly what Mills did, but in reverse. Instead of demanding that you have boys and girls sports and that you pretend Title IX has a different meaning from the Constitution and all these things that they pushed on the schools, you do the exact thing in reverse. You say you will get rid of all these things or you don't get the 55% of state money that supports your school system. And you will start enforcing laws and you will not have cashless bail and you will not let people out 15 times on parole and you will not allow drug traffickers to walk free. Or you don't get this other money that the state gives you for prisons and sheriffs. What we also do, by the way, is we build up behind that a wave of federal dollars. And I go down, talk to OJP, talk to SAMHSA, talk to a lot of these federal agencies that I know very well. We also incentivize towns to do the right thing. If you will do the following good things that we know are good government, we'll lower crime, lower drug trafficking, lower the property taxes, lower the regulatory burden that you're imposing. And people forget, a lot of the state power is also getting the towns, or let's take Bangor as an example. Bangor has its own ordinances. They have their own very slow roll process on whether you're going to build a house. If you're going to build a house, it might take you 2 years to get that permit. As a governor, I say to the council, real quick, on a 10-minute during their meeting, you're going to get any money from the state? You're going to clear all these permits. You're going to turn it around and make it happen now. You're going to stop imposing endless regulations. Look what they've done in Portland. Look what they just did. It's in Bangor, it's in Portland, it's in Waterville, it's in Augusta, it's in Lewiston. In Portland, they just put through something that says employees can no longer cooperate with law enforcement to get illegal aliens out of here. There's just 100 of them. If you have vacancies, we're going to bill you. This is my no nonsense. My whole platform is cut crime, cut taxes, no nonsense, and get the fraud out of the state. On the no-nonsense side, you use the power of the governorship to get people to renormalize and make predictable again their property taxes. You cut all these unfunded mandates. You stop the local capacity to continue to oppress with an ideologically, politically correct agenda. And you say, look, we're going to get back to plain vanilla. You need to teach math, teach reading. You need to teach sciences and history. You need to put the trades back in the schools, and we will measure your outcomes. We will reward teachers who are doing a good job. We will probably cut half the administrators at every level because we don't need deputy assistant superintendents. We will get rid of all these folks. And what you do is you lower the burden on the township. There's one other thing. There's a series of flowdowns from that you'll see in my property tax plan. But one of the other things that's really interesting is I think these assessments, which have come in very high, need to be relooked. The notion that you would have, it's not part of the traditional tax code as you understand property taxes to have a dramatic increase that's disproportionate in the assessment without having a proportional reduction in the mill rate. And that's not happening. And it's not happening because a lot of towns are quietly saying, well, if you just elevate the value of the house, I get more money that I can spend. I can spend it and build a new school. I can build a new this. I can build a new that. I can redo this bridge. All of which is to say, we need to get back to within our means. Living within our means was a very Yankee trait. It was a very Maine trait. I grew up, we saved everything. We saved the baby food bottles and put tax in them. We saved sheets till you couldn't use them anymore, and then you washed the car with them. And then when you got done with that, you tore them up and made kite tails out of them. I mean, we saved everything, right? We were a very well-managed, thoughtful, economically responsible, fiscally responsible state. And property taxes are a part of that. And it is an outrage. It is perhaps beyond the drug trafficking piece and the income tax piece. It is probably my number one item. I want to get property taxes down. I also want seniors at a certain age to have a property tax exemption. You've paid your dues. You do not need to keep paying property taxes at that level. I'd love to triple or quadruple the homestead exemption for seniors. And we will dramatically increase the exemption for seniors. I also want first-time home buyers for the first 5 years to have a property tax exemption because that's how you keep kids in the state. You get the trades back in the schools, you lower the tax burdens, you lower the regulatory burdens, you clear the permitting. Hannah Pingree says, I've got an answer to the housing crisis. We're going to build 500 new public housing units. And I called her out the other day at a tourism conference and I said, Hannah, it's illogical what you're saying here. That's not what people want. In the next 6 years, we have an 83,000 unit gap in overall housing in the state. I don't want the state to build 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 new public housing units where all of a sudden the drug traffickers in there and you got all these same problems that we've got right now because we're not taking care of our own infrastructure. I don't want more illegal aliens in there. That administration, Mills administration, built a bunch of housing that was supposed to be for veterans in Brunswick and turned it around and gave it to all these illegal aliens. I don't want that. What I want is a pro-business state that creates conditions where if I'm a young person, I want to start a company and go build houses, or I want to join a company, learn how to apprentice, and then start my own company. I want this to be the place where people come and go, you know what? If you're going to get ahead, it's the new frontier. Go to Maine. Maine is the place where it's pro-business, low tax, safe, great schools, and the property taxes are so low that actually you can prosper. And here's the crazy thing about it. The more people you have with growth and prospering, the more the revenue comes back into the state. It's ironic, but again, go read Jude Wanniski, go read Milton Friedman, go read any economist who's worth their salt. They'll tell you more growth generates more revenue, and less growth and oppression of the economy kills your tax base, runs it out of the state, leaves you poor with no medical, all the stuff that we need. This is common sense. It's not rocket science.
And it's already happening.
Yes. So let me add one last thing, and this is in the area of nonprofits. The state of Maine has this incredible overhang, 9,000 nonprofits. And what we know about some of these, compliments of the Maine Wire and some of these other folks that have done really significant FOIA looks, we know that a lot of these nonprofits are these Somali and Rwandan and Congolese and fake, basically, nonprofits who are sucking enormous sums of money out of our government, taxpayer dollars. And you might say, well, taxpayer dollars for doing something that's good for nonprofits. Well, actually, no. If even 5% of that 9,000 is fraudulent nonprofits, I'll call them fictional or fake nonprofits, which we know there are a number of them in the state. That's 450 fake nonprofits that are sucking down money. And you might ask, well, Bobby, how did that happen? How could we have nonprofits sucking down money that is taxpayer dollars that's not going to anything? And I say, well, I want you to imagine a bunch of wide receivers catching balls in the end zone. And I want to ask you a question. If you have a whole bunch of wide receivers, all these nonprofits catching free money in the end zone, what does that tell you? It tells you there's a quarterback, and the quarterback is a Democratic Party. And the quarterback is giving all this money that's your hard-earned dollars. There's no oversight whatsoever to those nonprofits. And why are they doing that? So they can get votes back. It's a vote-buying scheme, just like the $300 checks. Now, break. There's another problem with nonprofits. And by the way, there's very little oversight of nonprofits. I see no OPEGA investigations into it. OPEGA might have done 4 or 5 investigations last year. We need hundreds of investigations. And that's why I'm going to move from 6 investigators in the AG's office to 100 investigators, okay? And I'm told it'll take us 6 months to train 100 investigators. We'll get them, and we'll do it because this state is overrun with needs for investigation. But on the nonprofit side, and it's not just these nonprofits that are politically oriented, it's the nonprofits that come in. I have the sense that the Democrats would like to take everything north of Augusta, except for Starbucks, and turn it into a conservation zone. And basically just turn the whole northern part of the state into a great big conservation area. Forget businesses, forget jobs, forget schools, forget kids, forget people, forget entrepreneurs. Just make it a big conservation zone. And of course, these are people dictating policy from Kennebunkport and from the coast where they don't really care as long as the waves roll in and they have their solar panels. So I look at it and I say, you know what? This is really a problem. Look at the logic or the illogic of what you're doing. You have a township. Pick your favorite township that just had a new park put in it, okay? And you got the Nature Conservancy trying to take out our 4 dams. That will not happen. On day 1, I will sign an executive order preserving all those dams, ending that contract, saving Sappi. But go beyond that. In a little town, let's say 1,000 people, and this town of 1,000 people has a big chunk of open land that's not being used, and it's a farmer or it's a family it's gone down through a couple generations, and they've moved to Connecticut, and they're no longer in Maine, and the Nature Conservancy or pick your favorite conservancy shows up and says, we're going to buy that land from you. Well, at the moment that the land is not bought, taxes are being paid on it by whoever's the landowner. But now it goes to the conservancy, and there's 0 taxes being paid on it. Now, suppose that's 50% or 30% or 20% of all the land in that little town of 1,000. The only way you make up the difference, unless you have Bobby Charles as governor who's cutting the taxes down so hard that it's not going to kill you, the only way you make up the difference is that you're going to increase proportionally the tax burden on the citizens that remain in the town. This is just basic logic, basic economics. What they're doing by giving free money to all these nonprofits all over the state. You have a nonprofit, you don't have to pay anything. No, I'm going to take a completely different look at that. I'm going to say, let's look at what your nonprofit does for the state. Maybe we'll have you pay 50% of the tax burden. Maybe we'll have you pay in kind. Maybe we'll have you pay 100% of the tax burden. Just because you show up and there's an antiquated law that says you get to get lots of land and lots of opportunity and lots of all these benefits from all of us who work for nothing, doesn't mean I'm going to let that go on anymore. So we will set up a task force looking at the efficacy and the honesty of nonprofits in this state, and then we will turn it around.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a conversation with Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate, Bobby Charles. We recorded with Jim LaBrecque yesterday, and he mentioned that not only does he support you, but is he your chief energy advisor?
He is my chief energy advisor, as he was for Paul LePage, yes.
What's your plan?
So we have an incredible energy reduction, cost reduction plan. It's actually 25 points. Jim and Jerry Chesay and a number of others on this task force are all looking at different ways to save money. And in some ways, it's extremely simple. You just reverse all the mill's garbage and you'll start to save money. But it's bigger than that. We have to do some constructive things. I have a plan that's 25 points. Of course, the campaign, I'm just like a policy wonk, said, no, people won't absorb 25 points. You got to bring it down to like 8. So I consolidated and reworked my thinking and brought it down to 8 points. But the gist of it is as follows. We're going to get rid of net energy billing. Net energy billing is a crock. You just look on your bill and you'll find that 95 or 98% of this state is paying for the other 5 or 2% to have solar panels on their roofs. And it makes no sense at all. And I've sat down with the president of CMP and the vice president of CMP about a month ago and said, we've got a 24-point plan. Part of it is going to be this. Why do we have net energy billing? We have it because the Democrats have this ideological predisposition that they're going to force all of us to drive electric cars. Not that there's anything wrong with electric cars, but they're going to force everybody to do this by a certain date. They're going to force solar to fund everything by a certain date. Wind, we're going to blow the tops off all these mountains and we're going to put giant cement platforms off the coast and we're going to put 600-foot towers on them. Oh, and by the way, we think those are going to survive a nor'easter. But okay, cement on water, what could possibly go wrong? Anyway, all of this craziness, we're going to stop. And in the most fundamental way, we're going to get rid of net energy billing. We're going to sweep all the hacks, I hate to say it, but hacks off the PUC. We're going to put engineers, economists, and people who know utilities on the PUC. We're going to take politics out of the system. We're going to stop this so-called deregulation, which was really not deregulation. We're going to restore competition so that you have multiple companies trying to compete with each other to lower the rates that they charge you. We're going to work with the Trump administration. I've been down there 6 times now to try to get them to leverage getting Massachusetts to have us permit, as they leveraged New York, have us get the natural gas, the cheap natural gas that's coming out of Pennsylvania, complete the Constitution pipeline, link the Iroquois to it, so we get cheap natural gas here in the state of Maine. That's an additional. We're going to uncap hydro. Hydro generates about 6 to 10% of our energy now. It could generate a lot more. We're going to untap that, as well as, of course, saving the Sappi Mill and not taking out those 4 dams. We're going to take the Governor's Energy Council, which has now grown to 22 people, and we're going to reduce it back to what it was under LePage, 2 people. We're going to get the government out of the business of constantly over-regulating. We're going to get the state back to a point where we're looking at innovations instead of doing crazy things like telling people who build homes that they have to have insulation this thick and raising the cost of housing, by the way, in that process. We're going to roll back regulations and instead look for innovations. So what are the innovations? Some of the innovations are small modular nuclear reactors, thorium reactors. I have good friends in this industry who tell me, I know nothing about it, but they tell me within a shorter period of time than you think, within 2 to 4 years, we will have gone past the beta test and we'll be in a position that these safe modular reactors can be used. Now, we are overly restrictive in this state because there was a referendum saying that you have to go through all these hoops in order to put up a nuclear power plant. I would argue that these actually are not traditional nuclear power plants. These are modular, they're incredibly safe, incredibly efficient, completely scalable. We could have one that managed this dealership, maybe be the size of that bureau over in the corner there. You could have another one that's hardened that manages all of Augusta. You could have one that manages a county. These are very, very doable. People say it won't happen as fast as, before 2030. Actually, people in the industry tell me that's not true. It's already happening. And I said, well, where's the prototype? They say, well, Bobby, you're a Navy guy, 10 years Navy intelligence. You know that all these Navy subs are small modular nuclear reactors and carriers, the nuclear powered. And we haven't had an incident on any of them in the whole duration since we've had them. So we need to take technologies, cross-apply them, move innovation into this state when it comes to energy. There are a number of other things you can do that are sort of cross-fertilization. So for example, people hate these data centers, but I would argue that a data center in Jay and one in Sanford makes a lot of sense as long as they're not hooked to the grid. So what you do is they actually do biomass. They do cogeneration with the plants. They will have a closed loop, just the way some of our old paper mills that the Democrats shut down. Where I was growing up, we used to have people in my town working in Livermore, working in Jay. Those mills are all gone. But you actually would have jobs created by a data center. You'd have revenue generation. It would reduce the property taxes for whoever is in that area. If it's on water, we happen to have a lot of water. That's good. We happen to have a cool climate. That's good. And I've talked with these people and I hear all the negativity and they want to put a moratorium on data centers. But if you don't hook that to the grid, if they generate their own biomass, and by the way, what would loggers love more and our heritage industries than to have another market for wood products? We're the most forested state in the whole country, density-wise. So why would we not want more markets for our wood? I come back to this very basic thing as we close up this podcast. We are on a vicious cycle right now. If there was a manual for how to do everything wrong, these Democrats have followed every chapter. You can, however, create a virtuous cycle. And the virtuous cycle goes with good education, lower taxes, lower regulations, get the drug traffickers out, create a safe environment, get the fraud out, have a high integrity government, start innovating in every area, reward the sectors that grow, get people started working again, get the trades back in the schools. All this is common sense. There's nothing rocket science about it. Maybe modular nuclear reactors, that might be rocket science, but most of the things are not rocket science. And at the end of the day, we know how to do most of this. We grew up in this state. We know. And I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to stop trying to roll on a square block and go back to having a wheel.
Before we let you go, what would you like to tell the voters?
I think it's really simple. Vote from your heart. Understand that my heart is completely committed to you. I am a guy that spent his entire life in the service of our nation, and I am ready now with all those tools and that education and that experience to serve the state of Maine. And in a practical sense, if you can get an absentee ballot now, that's the easiest way early to make sure you don't miss the June 9 voting day. You might get sick that day, have to work late that day, have some problem with the kids that day. But if you get the absentee ballot, you can do that now, fill it out, put Charles across the top. That's the way you guarantee that this ranked choice voting idea, which we'd like to get rid of it, but we have to suffer it in the primaries right now. Make sure by putting Charles that we end up being counted in every round. And if you're one of those people that prefers to vote at the clerk's office, then you can go and do some early voting here pretty soon. And just make sure that you vote. We have so many Mainers in this state who are suffering, and we have so many that probably recognize in the things I'm talking about common sense, but we often get demoralized and we think, gosh, my vote doesn't make any difference or the corruption will overwhelm me. No, we need to make it too big to rig. We're doing that. We're up 5-1 on the entire field right now. We are going to blow out the Democrats in November. And I think it's just critically important that everybody understand this is our moment to save the state, to go and vote. And if you vote, we have 105,000 veterans and only about half of them vote. All of us need to vote. We need to get in there and vote, and not just to make yourself feel good, to make sure that the state you're living in is the state you want to be living in.
So what's the best way for somebody to get involved in your campaign?
Absolutely. You can just go to bobbyformaine.com. It's as simple as it sounds, BOBBYFORMAINE.com, bobbyformaine.com. And I need every volunteer. I need every dollar, every prayer, every door knock, every sign that you can possibly put out there just to spread the word. We still have Mainers that don't know that I'm in the race or don't know whoever's in the race. And I think it's important, if you believe the stuff that you heard today and you believe that this is the way forward for the state, that you go to bobbyformaine.com and then tell your neighbors, say, look, this guy's really talking common sense and he's got the power to deliver. He knows what he's talking about, and help all of us in a way. Many hands, again, makes light the load. Help us to save this state, because if we don't save it now, I fear that we will not get a chance again.
Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate Bobby Charles, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your service.
Thank you both.
Thank you. You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites guests and candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation. Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.